Okay, so in this video, I'm going to just do a little bit more refining, and then I'll show you how to start applying texture if you want to add texture to your project, which you don't have to, but just an option. And then we'll finish up by just finishing off that mouth in another video once it's hardened up. It's a little too soft to finish up the mouth right now. So I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of a roughness there. And a lot of times students don't think that matters, but then when it comes out of the kiln, they're sad. So if you gave me something like this, I would anticipate you were going to be sad because of bumps like that. But I certainly wouldn't give you a bad grade for it. This is nicely smoothed, but I think most students want to smooth things just a little better than that. So at this stage, you want it to be pretty firm to work with at this stage and not use a lot of water. So the sponge will take care of some of it. It'll also make some of the things that are problems more obvious. So there's just like that little nick right there. Just going to take little bits of clay and just smooth them into that wet spot. Make sure it's wet first, right? And I'm going to smooth it down with my sponge. If you need your rib tool at this stage, really keep it clean. If it's dirty, okay, the more you rub with this, and again, I'm rubbing with it, I'm not scraping with it. The more you rub with this, the better it gets. But those little goopy bits of clay that get on it, from time to time, you'll want to clean those off. And just swirl your finger like this to get rid of little problems. Just kind of swirl them around, give it another quick wetting. So I think you can see the difference I just made then. And again, sometimes when you're doing this, when it's wet and shiny like this, you don't notice it so much. I also like to have you clean the bottom, because if it isn't clean, then it's kind of rough. And then you have to put felt pads on it or something. So you can avoid that. So what I'm doing is I'm just scraping this guy down. And I'm doing this before I make the mouth perfect, because I have to put this down to make this work on this, and that would ruin a perfect mouth. So you want to work on this. Oh, and by the way, I haven't mentioned this before, but if you want to add a little foot ring or something like that, you can certainly do that by wetting this and making a little coil or a little slab or something, little ring slab. Just talk to me about that if you want to do it, because I'm not doing it on mine. Okay, so I'm just smoothing that out, just taking this guy and just really trying to get all the bumpiness off. And then I'm going to cut out this little bit. Wetting it down. Just gotta smooth it out. And then I'm just going to take this guy and do some more smoothing. Get this guy reasonably. It doesn't have to be as nice as the surface, but because it is the bottom after all. And then remember, right now it's kind of soft, but remember eventually you will write your last name on here to celebrate being finished. Okay, so you just want to get that reasonably smooth so it doesn't scratch up whatever it's sitting on. All right, so now let's talk about texture. So while it's slightly soft like this, it's pretty stiff, but I can still flex it. So while it's slightly soft is a good time to either add texture or to imprint texture. So either to incise or add texture onto your project. Eventually, I'm going to cut holes in this because I want to make it a tealight. But you could certainly imprint things into it. So if you're doing that, I always suggest that first you make the pattern. So say I wanted to make a series of imprints on here. Find something that is about as far apart as you want them to be, and just use that. And then just make dots wherever you want your little imprint to be. And just go all the way around like that. And then you could just take this guy. This is a perfectly good way to make an imprint, right? You could just take this guy and just make a little imprint with it. And now I have a series of 3 dots that were evenly spaced, right? You could go all the way through at this stage with something like this. So you could just poke the hole, or if you wanted something bigger hole, you could poke a hole with a sharp pencil and just spin it until it gets all the way through. If it's rock hard, you won't be able to do that, but you can do that with a pencil. Later in the last video, I will show you how to do that with a power drill, which works really well if you want to make just circular holes. This would also be a good time if you had something sharp like a needle, or even this guy would probably work, to again first draw your shape that you want to cut. Like I just drew that triangle, and then you would just cut right through and go through until it cuts all the way through and makes either an indent or a hole, depending on what you're doing. So you can certainly carve with this tool at this stage. You can carve. I generally don't recommend you carve with really small tools like this. It just doesn't look very nice when they're really tiny carvings. I think it looks better when they have a little bit of oomph to them. So use the like a skewer, or even the bamboo skewer, or this guy to make your carvings, or even the back of this guy will make nice, right? So if I wanted to make some sort of wavy carving on here like that, right? The back of this makes a nice version of that. And then glaze will actually collect in that eventually, and make it look even more pronounced, because the glaze will collect in the cavities and become darker where it collects than it is where it smooths off. So see how I'm just smoothing that? Wasn't a tragedy that I just added that. Pretty easy to just smooth it out. Give it a quick wipe. I might have to go back and fix it a little bit later. Okay, so the other thing you can do at this stage is you could add things. So you could make like little balls and add them, right? Or you could make like a lot of times people want to make little flowers or leaves or stems. So you could make like a little stem coil. So what you want to do with this is you want the clay to be wet and reasonably soft, so make sure it's damp, which this already is. And then you want to take a needle or your your paper clip, and then just rat up the area you're going to add it to. If you just put it on top of something like you would with Play-Doh, when the new little decoration dries, it's just going to pop off. It needs to have a texture to stick to. And then I'm just going to dab a little bit of water on there without getting rid of that texture. So now once I've done that, this is fresh soft clay. I don't need to rat this up. Once I've done that, then I can take my fresh soft clay and just follow that. And that will, and you know, usually when I do this, I just squeeze a little bit more water on just to get it in there, and then just tap it so it's really settling into that. And if you have ratty areas that are beyond your texture, you can just take your paintbrush and get rid of those. Okay, so that is how you would add something like that. And you could make little petals, right? So you could make like a little flower petals like this, right? The other thing I wanted to show you was if you wanted a more complicated pattern. So I did a simple pattern by just using the eraser as my spacing. If you wanted a more complicated pattern, you can do something very much like you would do with a pumpkin. For those of you who've done these with pumpkins, just put the pattern on your on here, and then just take your pin and just poke holes through the paper in the pattern to make your design onto your project. And again, you want to do this when the clay is stiff but not completely hard. Okay, so then you'll have all those nice little holes that make your pattern that you could either cut, or you could then take a carving tool, right? So like this guy, and just carve away either with the back or the front. I'm going to make the back so it's nice and bold, right? So there's that part of my octopus. And this kind of stuff, you can just leave it there. If you try to swipe it away, it'll smear it. You can just leave it there and then leave your project out, and it'll dry long before your project does, and then you can just rub those little bits off, okay?